And welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Still Curtain podcast. I'm your host, Tommy Jaggi, editor of StillCurtain.com. And joining me, as always, a Still Curtain contributor, Shayne Kubas. We are coming off a win. Make that 4 straight, Shayne, for the Pittsburgh Steelers, dating back to week 7 before the bye. Week 6, rather. Is that week 6? 6, 7, 8, 10. Week 6. So starting with the Raiders win with Justin Fields. We've since played 3 games with Russell Wilson at the helm. And this team is starting to fire on all cylinders. Now, obviously, we didn't get the defensive performance that we would have liked exactly in this game. But it's nice to know the Steelers can win a close game when you have to put up points.
Yeah, that was kind of the big takeaway. And the defense, honestly, like, in terms of yardage and things like that, they mostly held them in check, especially for Commanders' offense that has been excellent under rookie quarterback Jayden Daniels. And obviously, you kind of give them a free touchdown with the fake bunt that shouldn't have been that should have been made definitely by James Pierre. So all in all, I think the defense managed to play pretty well. But yeah, the offense was the story of the game.
Yeah, and speaking of that offense, Shayne, this offense with Russell Wilson. So far, it's a 3-week sample, so it's small, but 30.3 points per game, 382 yards per game, 8.7 yards per pass attempt, 20.7 first downs per game, 3.3 touchdowns per game. It just looks and feels like a different offense out there. And both you and I were advocates of rolling with Justin Fields, the 25-year-old, see what he has. What he offered with his legs was significant because Fields had 10 total touchdowns when he was the starting quarterback, but the passing game is just different. They're moving the ball easier.
Yeah, and I think the key thing here, and we talked about it after that first game, and what I specifically said was that if they are going to continue to have success the way they did in the first game with him, it has to come because of the aggressiveness, right? Like the biggest difference in the passing game has been the aggressiveness down the field, right? Like a lot of the same play action boot stuff, a lot of the short stuff. That stuff is still the same thing that they're doing with Justin Fields for the most part, at least schematically, right? Maybe you could say, Russ is making more with it, so be it, whatever. But it's the downfield throws, the actual shots that are planned down the field that Russ is hitting, because that is his greatest attribute as a passer, is the downfield bombs, the moon balls, we call them. That's been the biggest difference in the offense. That and the running game also has kind of came alive despite Fields not being back there. So.
Yeah, and Shayne, this game specifically against the Commanders, a lot of fluky things happened. I mean, it was special teams driven, which I hate. I hate when games are decided by big special teams moments. But you think about this game, and just before the half, I mean, the Steelers gave up a touchdown with seconds to go.
Yeah.
Russell Wilson didn't even eclipse 200 passing yards in this game. The Steelers lost the turnover battle. Somehow, with everything kind of going against them, their cornerbacks didn't have a great game. They still found a way to win this game, which I think in a way is encouraging.
Yeah, because this is usually a game that this team loses, right? Like whenever you lose the turnover battle or you don't put up a ton of offensive yards, like it's just not usually a great way to win. And this team in general has always won off the backs of the defense forcing a couple key turnovers, the offense not getting in its own way. You win like 17-14, right? Like that's kind of been the way the Steelers win games for the past few years. Now it feels like they have more ways to win. They may still want to win the same way for the most part, outside of a little bit more explosiveness in offense, obviously, because they're trying to get the deep ball going. But aside from that, like the offense still wants to do what it wants to do. It's just been more successful in doing so this year.
Yeah, for sure. We're going to get to our notes on Steelers Commanders in a little bit here. But let's talk about some of the news this week pertaining to the Steelers, pertaining to around the NFL. Alex Highsmith is going to be out 2 to 3 weeks.
Yeah.
This was kind of best case scenario when you saw him go down.
Yeah, it looked worse
helped
than
off
that.
by the trainers. Like my suspicion was that it was a low ankle sprain, and thankfully that's what it was. I'm glad it wasn't a broken foot or a broken ankle that could have potentially ended his season at this point. So it was first reported by Mike DeFabo of The Athletic, said he's going to miss some time. Mike Tomlin confirmed in his Tuesday press conference that Highsmith is out this week. And then his father, Sam Highsmith, said that, yes, it's a 2 to 3 week injury, not expected to be out longer than that. And so nice to know that in a few weeks, we can get him back here, Shayne. And boy, you talk about getting an insurance policy at the exact right time. We're going to talk about Mike Williams and Preston Smith here, but the timing worked out good for that.
Yeah, having somebody who can pair with Herbig now that he's expected to be back as well this week, as far as I know, that's going to be huge because we saw with Herbig, the pass rushing is there. The run defense is not quite as much, right? Is Highsmith at least. So having a guy out there that can spell Watt a little bit, and also allow Herbig to focus on what he does best, that's going to be really key until Highsmith comes back. But it's still obviously a loss you don't want to see.
Yeah, and it just feels like all season long, Shayne, the only thing that we've been doing is TJ Watt's drawing attention over there, and then you're just swapping Herbig for Highsmith. Like, you can't get these guys healthy at the same time. The hope, obviously, because it's not a season-ending injury, you want this group 4 deep. You want them in a heavy rotation by the end of the season and going into the playoffs. And we haven't really been able to see that yet. Certainly not the 4 of them together. It's going to be another 2 to 3 weeks before we can see all 4 of them together. And let's hope that nobody gets injured between now and then.
Hopefully.
Shayne, let's talk real quick about a non-Steelers injury. Dak Prescott is out for the season. Huge blow to a Cowboys team that was really underwhelming this year. I know Dallas has had a lot going against them. Micah Parsons injured, Deron Bland's injury that caused him to miss most of the first half of the season. Tank Lawrence was injured, but this is just not their year. It seems like the Cowboys have one of these, like once every 4 years, their quarterback gets injured and their season is toast.
Yeah, and it's unfortunately, as much as you hate to see somebody get hurt the way Prescott was, this is probably the best thing for them, for him to be out the rest of the year, because realistically, this team wasn't going anywhere with him. But because he is a quarterback that is a very good one, he's probably going to get you a couple wins that Cooper Rush might not, right? Or Trey Lance, whoever ends up playing most of the time. And I think this team desperately needs a reset year with the way things have been going, because you look at the last 3 years, 12-5, 12-5, like they're successful in the regular season, but we've seen postseason, this just isn't a postseason team right now. And I think that they need to do a lot of retooling. And with the way Jerry Jones is, you need to have a bad season like this to get him to actually do something, because usually he's a little bit too confident in his team. So maybe this is the best thing for them, but obviously hoping Prescott comes back healthy. So.
Yeah, and it's just hard to, I feel like, to have a reset year when you go and pay your 31-year-old quarterback $62 million a year. I mean, they're Dak committed for sure, but maybe they're in Travis Hunter watch now, because with Cooper Rush leading, or if Trey Lance comes in there, you're not winning many more games. I looked ahead at their schedule just for fun, and they've got one more game against the Giants, a game against the Panthers, and that's probably the only games that they're even going to be within a touchdown of the rest of this season. So
sure seems like
not great stuff for them. Let's move on and talk about TJ Watt and his Defensive Player of the Year odds. I was interested to see what those would look like after week 10. Really quiet week for TJ Watt. Not saying that it was bad, draws attention like he normally does, but didn't record a sack in this game. Only had 2 pressures. It kind of like the most negated TJ Watt game that maybe I've seen before when he's played healthy. And so didn't have much of an impact in this game. Highsmith did some good things on the opposite side of him, had some good pressures in this game. Cam had a 2-sack game, but Watt really quiet. And I was interested to see what the Defensive Player of the Year odds would look like after this game. And Shayne, they're really in favor of TJ Watt still. So according to DraftKings Sportsbook, Watt is -200, the odds-on favorite by a mile to win the Defensive Player of the Year award in 2024. The next highest is tied with Dexter Lawrence and Chris Jones at +1,000 odds, and then Will Anderson and Trey Hendrickson at +1,200 odds. So Watt is a easy front runner for this award right now. And I think it comes down to a couple of things. The Steelers' overall defense, they're 2nd in points allowed, they're 8th in yards allowed. And then you look at what the other teams have going for it. Like, as good as Dexter Lawrence is, and I would be perfectly fine giving him the DPOI vote, the Giants reek, and the defense isn't even good. And so it is hard to give it to a player on such a bad team when his side of the ball isn't even performing well. Chris Jones, I get that one makes a lot of sense too, but Chris Jones has not been productive this year. He is the best player on a good Kansas City defense. And so kind of in the same boat as Watt. Watt's odds are a lot higher. And hey, look, if Watt gets it this year without the production and without the pressures, I think most people would be able to say this guy is at least deserving of the award twice in his career. He didn't win it when Stephon Gilmore won it back in 2019 when he was deserving. There's a couple times Aaron Donald got it when Watt was also deserving, not necessarily more so than Donald, but
right.
a guy that did it twice in his career.
Yeah, and I think the key thing here is, his production isn't bad on the surface, like in terms of like pressures and sacks. It's just below what we normally see from him. But I think partially, ironically, and I know we've given this particular organization a lot of flack in the past, and Steelers fans are not a fan of them. I think PFF coming out with that chip percentage stat and like talking about how much he's affected by that is helping him actually a little bit, because it highlighted what we've already always known, which is teams do not let TJ get a free run at their right tackle if they can help it, right? Like they simply don't. They find ways to impede his rush, to make his pressure percentage and his sacks. Like he's always been able to get a lot of sack numbers, but this year in particular, the teams are just saying like, listen, if everyone else beats us, so be it. We're not letting TJ Watt wreck the game. And he still had moments. And I think this is the key thing. He's had flash plays, right? The plays that that he's known for, the batted balls up in the air that get intercepted, the forced fumbles, the key sacks in key situations. Like when he's given an opportunity to make a play, he pretty much always makes it. And then you add in the run defense this year being phenomenal. Like I think he is deserving of the award. There are other people that are going to outproduce him statistically. And obviously, like this is the caveat with, if Aiden Hutchinson was healthy, he'd probably be running away with the award, right? Let's just say that like he was having an insane season. You have to give him credit, but unfortunately, misses the rest of the year, most likely with the leg injury. Ultimately, though, I think, like you said, this is a guy that deserves this award twice in his career. He has been that good for this long. And if it happens to be a weird year where a lot of the best defenders are not on great defenses, and you can argue whether that matters or not, who cares? I'm gonna be okay with it. Let me just put it that way.
Yeah, for sure. And it makes you wonder, just seeing what's up and coming in the NFL. Aiden Hutchinson is a awesome football player. And he was he was running away with the odds before the injury. Obviously the Lions have the record and just the overall talent on their team. But is this Watt's last year? Like, is this his last year to be a top 2, top 3 candidate for this award before he becomes a long shot? What do you think?
I think it depends. I think, unfortunately, because of the way that we play defense and the fact that this year is the year that everyone's highlighting how much he's being helped by, like how much offenses are trying to stop him from impacting the game. Once people like kind of forget about that a little bit, or they don't care as much about that, it's going to take him having the 20 sack season and the insane statistical production to be up for the award again. And that is something that's not a guarantee in this defense because of the way that it operates. Now, if we were to get a different defensive coordinator for some reason, now with how well we're playing, I don't think that's going to happen. I think Terrell Austin's here for as long as the defense is playing well. But unless we were to get a more creative defensive coordinator that was specifically trying to get him open to make plays and get sacks, he may not have the statistical production that he had in his career again.
Yeah, it does make me wonder, like, when is the attention going to shift away from him? There's going to be a point in his career where it's like, all right, this is just not the same Watt anymore. Let's shift it over to the opposite side.
And he might have a couple opportunities
again. So the Khalil Mack type route, maybe. But Watt is that type of player. We know that he's not always the fastest to the quarterback. He's not always going to get there the most consistently. You give him 15 reps on an island, he might only get one pressure, but that pressure might result in a strip sack and a recovery for the Steelers in the biggest moment of the game, like we saw that it did this year already. And so it not surprising to see him up there, but I am a little bit surprised to see him just a runaway with the award at this point in time. I do think, though, Shayne, that Watt is going to have to be more productive in the second half of the season. I don't think that you can get away with having a 9.5 sack season or an 11 sack season if somebody jumps way ahead of him statistically and still has a good defense. Then things could turn around in these odds. So keep your eye on that. We'll continue to monitor that for sure. And again, it's an individual award, not a team award, but you like to see it, and it gives us something else to root for there. All right, Shayne, Steelers updated win projections just dropped from NFL.com since Cynthia Freeland. Before the start of the season, I want to say for most betting outlets had the Steelers 8 to 8.5 win football team, and they were really fun to have a losing season, which I find comical every year.
Yeah, it's really fun.
The odds makers project them to have a losing season. Bet the over. I mean, bet the over until we see it happen.
It's free money every year. It's funny.
So they were able to do it with Trubisky and Pickett. Of course, they were going to be able to do it with Fields and Russell Wilson. So now, as we enter week 11 here, the Steelers are projected 11.0 wins from NFL.com. Their floor is 9.5, which I think that they should be able to get there pretty easily. They're ceiling 13.5 wins this year. They are minus 1,400 to make the playoffs, which essentially means you bet a lot of money on them to not not make the playoffs would be probably a poor choice, because they're going to make the playoffs at this point. They're 3 wins from locking in a playoff seed, I would say, because of the lack of depth in the AFC in the wild card race. And so at least trending towards the wild card spot, maybe the division, and we'll see how this game goes today. We're going to talk about that. Do you think 11 wins is fair to set that mark right now for the Steelers, Shayne?
I think so, because if you look at it, obviously 6 of the 8 remaining games are division games. So you could just sit there and say, okay, let's split those 3, right? Let's split 3 and 3. Let's just say that. Now, I'm not saying that's what's going to happen, but if you do that, that means you also project them to win one of the Eagles-Chiefs game, which I think, with the way that the Eagles are playing, is tougher than I thought it might be going into the season, because the defense is definitely kind of kicking things into high gear, and Hurts has been able to get enough done with the passing game and Saquon Barkley. But the Chiefs are a weird one to me, because that's kind of the game that there's a chance that team is still unbeaten. Like, if you look at their schedule, they have to play the Bills, which is tough, of course, but they've seemingly, outside of last year with the weird offside call with Kadarius Toney, seemingly have the Bills number, right? Like, they can kind of get that win most likely. There's a chance that they could be undefeated going in the Christmas Day game, and I think the Steelers are like one of those teams that can kind of counteract a lot of the stuff that the Chiefs are doing, where like the Chiefs refuse to beat themselves, and the Steelers usually find ways to make teams beat themselves. Like, I think that combination could create a very interesting game, right? Where maybe it's a slugfest where the Steelers somehow manage to win or whatever. So I think if they win one of those, it's pretty comfortable 11 wins. But it really comes down to how they perform in the division, because you have 2 teams, obviously, in the Bengals and Browns, that as scary as the Bengals are capable of being offensively, they're just as scary to like their defense is just as scary in terms of like giving up 40 points potentially. So that's kind of a crapshoot. And then the Browns are just the Browns right now. They're not that great. So you could be 4-2. You could be even 5-1, because we seemingly beat the Ravens every time for no apparent reason. So it's really tough to kind of gauge whether 11 wins is fair or not.
Yeah, I think that's a fair mark to put it at right now. I mean, that Browns team is bad. I would be disappointed if the Steelers split with the Browns.
Yeah,
I want to get both of those. And getting both of those is going to put you already at 9 wins. You just need 2 more outside of that. Can you get 2 between twice against the Ravens, twice against the Bengals, once against the Eagles, and once against the Chiefs? I kind of feel like the Eagles game is the hardest remaining game on the schedule. Eagles and at Baltimore, maybe. Yeah, Chiefs, obviously. Yeah. I mean, Chiefs are well coached. They have Patrick Mahomes. They just can't score. And so if the Steelers are able to do anything offensively in that game, maybe they'll have a chance on Christmas Day. So we'll see. We'll table that conversation for a later time here. But let's talk Steelers versus Commanders notes from week 10. And if you guys are joining us here in the live chat on YouTube, please drop us a message, leave us a comment, ask a question. Shayne and I would love to be able to get to your questions and anything that you want to get to right now, Shayne, before we dive in.
Yeah, we have a couple from our friend R Barley 18, of course. He's got a few things in here. This one was earlier in the show. Stupid question. No stupid questions usually. I know it's not game situations, but think anyone ever took notice of the piss missiles that Patterson launches, Cordell Patterson, to fans 25, 30 rows back in warmups? I mean, that could be useful. I don't know. I've never seen Cordell throw in a game. I don't think he's ever done that. And we've seen receivers who can do that sometimes, but that is certainly an interesting thought to have here. He also mentioned about that Sutton's going to take more time away from KZ and Bishop potentially, or from KZ then Bishop. KZ is he is a possible cut candidate. I think that as the season moves on, if we need to make some roster moves, he's probably not very high, or he's probably high on the list of guys that you might move on from if you need to make some room. He did also like my comments about Terrell Austin. Isn't the DC outside of name? Yeah, I mean, listen, the defense has changed whenever there's been different defensive coordinators. They have changed some things up. So I think Austin is doing some of that. But yes, we know that Tomlin is the final say when it comes to defensive stuff. So so that's fair to say, but yeah, we know.
And we probably should mention too, Shayne, as we talk about KZ in the comments here, Terrell Edmonds no longer with the Steelers.
Yes,
That
yeah.
one surprised me a little bit.
Yeah,
I
a little bit.
never
But
thought that Edmonds was special or anything that way,
no.
but he's long, fast, can tackle. I thought they'd use him as a gunner. I thought he would still be a depth piece on this team, and he was expendable to the team. And we see now, I mean, the Steelers have a really good gunner, Ben Skoranek, and made a game-changing play in this one. So I credit him largely for that win as well. All right, let's dive in here. Let's start with the offense and take a look at Pittsburgh's win against the Commanders, 28-27 win. We'll start right here with the quarterback, Russell Wilson. Not a great game statistically from Russ in terms of completion percentage. Completed 50% of his passes, 14 of 28, 195 yards, threw an interception, but also had 3 touchdowns in this contest. And I think the game, when I went back and watched the All-22, the game was a lot better than the raw numbers indicate. I think he did a lot of good things. I think that he was, for the most part, he was smart with the ball. The Commanders brought a lot of pressure. He was able to escape it sometimes, just get rid of the ball. And that's part of the reason for his low completion percentages. A lot of throwaway passes. He wasn't going to try to risk making that big play, fumbling, getting sacked, whatever. And so wisely got rid of the ball at times. Also made some plays down the field, including the huge play to Mike Williams late in the game. So I think that it was a pretty good performance, a B+ performance overall from Wilson in my mind.
Yeah, he made big plays. He didn't make a lot of plays because, again, a lot of times there wasn't a lot to do with the football, unfortunately, because of the combination of pressure and just kind of the way things were going offensively at times. Had a couple stinker drives, honestly, that just kind of bogged the rest of it down. But in general, he made the plays that need to be made, right? And I think that's the difference with a guy that is a veteran like Wilson. Is as much as we liked Fields and what he was doing, he doesn't have the same experience that Wilson has in those clutch moments, in the big game moments, right? And he doesn't have the same ability to he escapes pressure better in terms of his athleticism, but not so much to then create a throw down the field like Wilson can. You think of that big play to Austin that kind of set up the touchdown. That's a play that Fields might not make because, again, he probably looks to run there, which is fine for an offense that was humming to a decent level with him. But now that we're trying to accomplish more in the passing game, that's what you need to do in that situation is find a throw down the field. So I think overall, yeah, the numbers don't look particularly great. The 3 touchdowns obviously helps. The yardage for how many completions he had was also very good. But again, that's why you say he made some big plays, just maybe not a ton of plays.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to describe it. If you look at the running backs in this game, Najee was on fire before this, not necessarily in this contest, 21 carries for only 53 yards, did punch in a touchdown, 2.5 yards a carry. It was Jaylen Warren who really got things going in the second half. And it's nice to see because Warren's had a really quiet season so far, dealing with a hamstring, dealing with a knee. And so finally seeing him healthy, so frustrating to see that fumble at the goal line there. And I know he's had issues with that in the past. Yeah. I don't fault him entirely for that because he's so close trying to get in at that point. And I think there's a discussion to be had here, Shayne, and it even went up to the replay official. Should that play have been called dead? And you're talking about 2.5 seconds of his momentum stopped before the ball came out. That's long enough to me to blow the whistle. And that would have given the Steelers the ball at the goal line with 4 plays to score a touchdown. Instead, wipe 7 points off the board, give the ball to Washington right there. Huge game-changing play. I think that Warren had a really good game running the football, averaged 4.7 yards a carry prior to that, and that could have been the nail in the coffin essentially right there, but that fumble loomed large.
Yeah, and I think Warren obviously still had a really nice game, like you said. And I think the fumble is kind of hard to put on him because of the situation, right? Like you could say, like, all right, you're clearly not getting any more yardage at that point. Your momentum's been stopped. Just get down, right? There's an element of that, and I get that. But again, that was one where it's like he's not expecting to not get called down. I think he's just trying to fight, and then they're going to call the play. But because they didn't obviously get that fumble, and then with Najee, he ran hard. I don't think he looked any different in this game. I just think the run blocking wasn't as good as we've seen in the past couple games. Like even Warren, like he had more yards per carry, but it wasn't this huge like lane that he had constantly or anything like that. I think the run blocking was not the way that it's been up to this point. I think Frazier had a fine game, but he wasn't as good as he's been in the past so far in his rookie season. McCormick had a couple of nice blocks, but he didn't also have the best day overall. Like this was a game I think that the offensive line didn't quite play up to par, but there is one player that we are going to have to talk about that actually kind of did for once.
Yeah, and I think well, let's move to that right now, actually. I've been a really big Broderick Jones critic this year. I like the draft pick a lot. I was super encouraged by him last year. This, I think, was probably the best game of his career. It's either this or his game against Baltimore early last season.
Yeah.
I was very encouraged by what I saw. And so what I like to do is go back and watch the broadcast again. I like to go back and watch the all 22. And then I like to go and look at the PFF grades and see if what they're seeing lines up with what I saw. And when I watched Broderick Jones, I saw a player who didn't make the 2 to 5 really ugly, egregious, sloppy reps in this game. It really had a strong game overall, and his worst rep was like nothing to complain about, really. I think a couple of his worst reps in this game were just pushing guys up around the arc, not necessarily staying engaged, but doing enough to keep his edge rusher out of the play. And it resulted, Shayne, in an 82.9 pass block grade from Broderick in the second highest overall grade of his career for the Steelers so far. I do think that the tape lined up with what we saw. And if nothing else, even if we're a little bit discouraged by the run blocking this time, and again, the Commanders brought a lot of run blitzes. They brought a lot of pressure.
They did a really good
part
job
of the reason,
the run.
Part of the reason for the issue there for sure. But definitely something to be encouraged by for Broderick Jones. And now this marks 3 straight games dating back before the bye where his overall grade has jumped significantly in each contest.
Yeah, you hope that he can at least settle in and be a startable player, right? Because let's be honest, like he has not been for the vast majority of his career. Just has not been a player that most teams would consider playable or startable, right? He just hasn't. And we've had to play him for a combination of reasons, either to see what he has, or in this case, because Troy Fautanu's injured, like whatever the case may be, right? But if he can at least settle in and play 90% as well as he played in this game on a regular basis, that's totally fine. It gives you a piece on the offensive line you could at least consider moving forward. And again, maybe that opens you up to, like, if you think he can be a capable right tackle, does that mean that despite him playing better this year, do you have to pay Dan Moore? Can you play Troy Fautanu at left tackle where he was drafted anyway? You know, it opens things up, right? Opposed to being like, well, Broderick isn't part of the future at all, right? This at least gives you hope that he might be able to be a piece.
Yeah, and you mentioned Dan Moore. I think there's going to be a real conversation. Like if Broderick can continue at this rate by the end of the season, what do you do with Moore? Because Moore is going to get paid. But I think at the same time, Shayne, Dan Moore is the perfect example of why sometimes it just requires patience for an offensive lineman. We saw 3 bad years of Dan Moore, makes a significant jump this year, by far the best season of his career. He is a starting caliber tackle now, and he is a quality football player at this point. I never thought I would say that about him.
No,
but if it took 3 years for Dan Moore, maybe it's just going to take some time for Broderick. Broderick is halfway through his second season, didn't even start early last year. And again, a lot of people would argue he's playing out of position, which again, there's a case to be made there as well. Is it just going to take time? I don't know. I think the one thing that's really hard for us to gauge here on the outside is what is the work ethic like? What is the motivation? How are you trying to improve your technique daily? Because he was called out by Duke Manyweather, the famous offensive line coach, for laziness. And so there's no other way to get around it. At times, Broderick looks lazy on the field, and I don't want to, I hate giving him that label, not knowing him personally, but there's just a lot of sloppy, ugly reps.
The tape speaks for itself, right?
It does.
You have to go off of what you see, and what we see, because we don't see practices, we don't see, meetings, we don't see any of that. When he's been on the field this year and when he started, he just kind of looks lost at times. Like you think of the play where he just kind of didn't block anybody because he looked around like he didn't know what the play was, or whatever it is, the bad reps, like you said. And you could say, or bad reps don't necessarily mean anything aside from just being bad, right? But when you're that talented, and that's kind of what Manyweather specifically says, like he's too talented to play this way, it makes you question everything about him. And I think he's been hearing that. I think he knows that. And if it's any indication with this game, maybe he is starting to pick something up or starting to figure it out a little bit.
Yeah, and obviously, Shayne, you and I, we don't have any beefs with any of the players. No, we just call it like we see it. We always do. And when Broderick's playing bad, I'm going to let you know. When he's playing good, I want to give him the props where the props are due. I think that he had a really solid and encouraging game overall. And Shayne, he graded out as the 5th best player on this team, offense or defense. And that's not a place where you can ever slot Broderick. Like he's always really low in that regard, because offensive linemen get graded so poorly when they make really negative plays. And so he just didn't have those in this game. So definitely good to see from him. I thought the overall performance on the offensive line was just okay. It wasn't great. And again, like you said, not a lot of running lanes in this game. Kind of on the same thought, Shayne, McCormick's grades kind of coincide because he has a couple sloppy reps mixed in, and which really affects that. But I think McCormick is a good player overall. You can see the physicality, the tenacity in his game, pulling out. We saw him on a couple of those pulling plays, just paving ways near the goal line there. So definitely a lot to be encouraged by for sure. When you look at the future of the offensive line, Frazier back, we're not going to have Fawatanu until maybe the playoffs or next season. So, but the future of the offensive line is looking bright right now for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, let's move to the defensive side of the ball, and let's
start. We should probably real quick talk about Pickens and Mike Williams a little bit.
Yeah,
because we'll talk about Williams later. But George, man, listen, you guys can go back and talk and see us talk about whether or not he should be on the football team with the way he was acting, the way he was playing. Maybe as much as we liked what Fields was doing, maybe he just didn't like playing with Justin Fields. I don't know what it was, but Russell Wilson and him have got it figured out. They have been spectacular, and he specifically has been spectacular. The touchdown, we don't even what can we say about it that hasn't probably been said? I mean, there's like 5 people on planet Earth who might make that catch, and he's one of them. Like that, and I say might because you never guarantee it. And again, he just every week he makes a play or two that you just don't see anybody else play. Like they don't make those plays. You don't see it anywhere else in the NFL. And then he also has maybe one of the funniest moments of his entire career. And there's many that you could fall into this category as funny George Pickens moments, but just suplexing a guy after the interception and then seemingly by the broadcast angle trying to eat his face. Not sure what was going on there. Only George could tell us what that was about, but still one of the funnier things I've seen in a long time. So yeah, you get a little bit of everything with George.
He's a bizarre player for sure. That touchdown catch, Shayne, you can count on a few fingers, probably not even one hand, how many guys can make that catch over the last decade in football. I mean, that's like a DeAndre Hopkins, Des Bryant level, like acrobatic ability. There's not many guys that can do that. And no, he doesn't create a lot of separation. He has gotten better after the catch. We saw one of the plays in this game. He just bounced it back across the middle of the field. But you give the guy 7 targets. He turns it into 91 yards and a touchdown. He is really coming into his own with Russell Wilson at the helm here. And I saw a stat on George Pickens by Pro Football Focus just today. Pickens has 11 catchable targets beyond 20 yards, Shayne. He's caught all 11 of them. All 11 of his catchable targets beyond 20 yards, which equated to a 97.7 grade from PFF when targeted beyond 20 yards this year. He's the 10th overall graded receiver in the NFL so far entering week 10. It's not hard to see why. He has his flaws. He could be a better route runner. He could be a better separator. But what he does, his niche is so good that it's kind of unrivaled by other players in the NFL. So definitely good to see that hot streak continue here with him. And the Mike Williams catch, I mean, you talk about a clutch moment. You go 1 for 1. You get one look in this game. You turn it into a 32-yarder here. We'll table that for just a second when we talk about Mike Williams. Let's move over to the defensive side of the ball. I want to start at the edge rusher group. We talked about TJ Watt being pretty much neutralized in this game already. Alex Highsmith drawing some pressure on the other side. And then Preston Smith getting involved a little bit. Signature play of the game, Shayne, was he cut off that angle, that scramble around late in the game. It was on a 3rd and 16, like a must-have play for Washington, and it brings the ball carrier down for a big loss there. Overall, a strong performance by Preston Smith as well in his debut.
Yeah, he had a really nice day. Kind of exactly what you expect. Played about a 1/3 of the snaps, roughly. Made an impact in those snaps. Like that's what he's going to have to be, right? He's going to have to be a guy that plays a lot of rundowns. He's going to have to set the edge hard. He's going to have to be able to make smart plays as a veteran. And he kind of showed all those attributes in this game, right? He kind of showed exactly what you want to see. We talked about TJ, 2 pressures. but two pretty important pressures, right? You get the hit in the end zone that makes that play dead, and then you get the play that almost was one of his signature sack fumbles, but wasn't. But he still stopped that play as well. Like he still made an impact when he could, and Highsmith obviously before the injury was having a nice day as well. So.
Yeah, and the other play I want to mention with Watt here, I don't hear a lot of people talking about it. Watt got completely turned around in the end zone. He was held pretty blatantly, I thought.
Yeah, we know.
So that play, even if he doesn't get the sack, even if you just call the holding, that's a safety.
That's a
safety, and Steelers get the ball back. It makes it so the game doesn't have to come down to the situation that it does in those moments. And so I think that was a missed call by the refs. And we can talk about, I mean, really the most controversial play of the game was right at the end there.
Yeah.
Where does that spot come in? Where do you call the forward progress? I know that Zach Ertz caught that pass, was trying to fight back towards that. And so, but where the spot came in by the official, that was a whole yard short. I'm sorry. I mean, I'm going to say it like it is. I came up a yard short. And so I think that it was either a first down or it was really, really close. It wasn't the full yard short like that. And when you try to challenge those or it goes to the replay official and they try to overturn a spot call, it's so hard to do. So I think if that was called the other way, if it was called a first down for Washington, I think Washington has a chance to go down and win the game with that play right there. That was 4th and 9. So
yeah, I will say in my head, let's say they give him that spot, right? Mm-hmm. I personally think the next play is a TJ Watt sack fumble and we win. That's just in my head. I'm going to say that just because, hey, it's not unrealistic. That's what he does, right? But no, I'm with you. It looks pretty bad on the broadcast. Now, granted, again, the broadcast is not 100% like what is actually on the field. It definitely looked closer than they spotted it, and I think that certainly had an impact on the call ultimately going against them.
Yeah, it did. I think the only way that this feels a little bit better for both sides here is though knowing that Jaylen Warren's forward progress could have been called on that play. I think that was a miss. And then after that, Watt getting just completely turned around in the end zone, like a 2-hand hold, couldn't even get off of it. The right tackle there, and which should have resulted in a safety and Steelers getting the ball back. But yeah, it was a definitely controversial call. Anytime something comes in that close on a critical, like game altering 4th down, you're going to draw some controversy over that. So I shared more thoughts on stillcurtain.com if you want to go check those out over there. The interior defensive line, Cam Hayward. He is the engine that makes this team run here. Had a 2-sack game. Thought a pretty good game overall by Cam. And then Keanu Benton came up with a really big run stop as Jaden Daniels was trying to escape. That potentially saved the game right there too. Would have given Washington a new set of down. He had room to run.
Yeah, I mean, Benton is one of those guys where I feel bad for because he's seemingly never can get a sack, but is always in the backfield. So it's just like he's the ultimate like, did you watch the game guy, in my opinion, on this team? Because there's a lot of guys just like, oh, yeah, they had 2 sacks at a great game. Sometimes they didn't. They just got like free pressures, whatever, right? With Benton, like he never seems to be the finisher of the play, but he's oftentimes is the reason that a sack happens or the bad play happens. So I was glad to see him have a couple nice moments on the game. And then, yeah, Cam, you can't teach strength like that, man. Like that's just what it comes down to. His ability to just kind of long arm guys and push them back. And even Daniels, as athletic as he still couldn't get away from Cam. Like he needs one arm to tackle people. That's just kind of what it comes down to, especially a more like slender guy like Daniels. He just continues to defy the age curve and everything else. Is again, take it with a grain of salt, but this is his highest graded pass rushing season through 9 games he's ever had, according to PFF. Like you look at all the numbers, like statistically, this is one of the best seasons of his career, if not the best, honestly, in some cases.
Yeah, and Benton might seriously be the best defender in the NFL that doesn't have 3 career sacks.
Exactly. It's like
he's been so close so often, and he is very disruptive from the middle. So I'll give him props. If you just check the box score, you're never going to see that show up.
No.
But if you go back and watch the L22, you can see what he does for this team in terms of his pass rush and his lateral quickness. Like on that play in a critical run defense, I think that there are times where he can get washed out as a run defender. He's not really that 2-gapping nose tackle, that zero technique, like the Steelers try to force fit him in there because they don't have that guy in their roster.
Yeah.
But he does have the lateral quickness, and he shut down a play like that, a game-altering play potentially. The secondary, well, let's start with the linebackers first. Off-ball linebackers, Patrick Queen had a really good game. I
He
was
did.
really hard
He
on
did.
him starting off, and I hope this continues because I really want to see that game against the Ravens this week where it's like, oh, it's only Roquan, and you and I both were there too. It's like, is it Roquan? Is it Patrick Queen? A good player in his own right. This was a really encouraging performance by him. He was flying all over, hitting guys receivers as they were just touching the ball, jarring the ball loose. Sideline to sideline ability is all there, and I thought he strung together maybe the best game of his Steelers career so far.
I definitely think it was his best Steelers game. I think the thing with him, and this is where if he can play this way, which was the sideline to sideline, it's see ball, hit ball with him. Like that's his ultimately what he is as a player. I'm not saying that he doesn't know what he's doing out there or anything like that. I'm not going to go that far, but he just isn't the most instinctful, like heady linebacker. He just isn't, and he might never be. But if you can get him in a situation where he's hunting the quarterback that can run like Daniels, we saw how fast he got to him. And as fast as Daniels is, he somehow wasn't fast enough against Patrick Queen, right? Like that is where he shines when he's in open space trying to hunt down a ball carrier. If you can put him in more positions like that and the defensive line can free him up enough, and that's been a problem because, again, Benton is not a nose tackle. He's going to play nose tackle because no one else can play nose tackle, but he just isn't one. We know this. It just gives him more space to do his thing, right? And I think in this game you saw that more than ever. And as a run defender, if he can play like this against the Ravens and against teams moving forward, that contract will start to look a little bit more reasonable. And again, I'm not going to go as far to say that I'm, excited that he's still on the team right now or that I'm thinking he's going to be great, but it needs to look a lot more like this moving forward if that's going to be the case.
Yeah, I agree, Shayne. And I think the one unfortunate thing is that this performance kind of came at the cost of not playing Peyton Wilson as much.
Yeah.
And I like Peyton Wilson. I think that he's going to be a really good football player. And if that's what it takes right now to kind of play the rookie a little bit less, if Queen's playing well, then so be it. I think there's probably going to be a little bit more even split by the end of the year, and we'll see. I don't know the status of Cole Holcomb. We haven't heard anything that way. No. Maybe he'll be able to make a comeback, but we can't count on that for sure. At the very least, you got three guys that can man the position. Hopefully all three can stay healthy. Move over to the secondary. On paper, Shayne, it looks like the secondary played a good game. The cornerbacks in particular, because Jaden Daniels was 17 of 34, only 202 passing yards, 5.9 yards an attempt, a 68 pass rating. But these guys were torched too often. Penalties, big plays allowed, allowing third down conversions, like you name it. It was frustrating to watch at times. And that's what you saw on film. And if you look even at their grades in this game from Pro Football Focus, the lowest graded players on the Steelers this week were three cornerbacks. Cameron Sutton had a 27.4 grade on 19 snaps. Joey Porter, a 33.4 grade, which we can see Joey Porter is so high variance right now. He needs to be more consistently good. He relies too much on the grabbiness. He just needs to trust himself. Like the penalty down the sideline, like you didn't need to completely put your arm around, box him out. You already had great position. Just trust yourself. Trust your ability to swat the ball away or disrupt the lane when the ball's in the air. Don't go so far as to get those penalties because they're adding up now. Dante Jackson, 41 grade in this game before he got injured. And Beanie Bishop, a 57 grade, was the best on the team at the cornerback position this week, which isn't what you want to see. I thought it was a pretty discouraging game from the corners overall. I just don't know where they go from here because there were times early in the season where it's like, ooh, this is looking really encouraging. Dante Jackson's getting picks. Bishop's getting picks from the slot. Porter's being completely shut down from the outside, which he is still statistically. He's the top lockdown cornerback from Pro Football Focus in terms of like percentage of catches allowed in his area, but the penalties are killer. And there's a few of those plays. The game is like, what'd you doing there? So I think there's less to be encouraged by now than there was earlier in the year.
Yeah, I think the first thing is Dante Jackson had a solid start to his Steelers career, right? Mm-hmm. He had the interceptions, which are great to get. Some of them not so much were him necessarily making great play, but there were a few that were him making great plays. And since kind of then, it's just not been the same. And I think my concerns with him going in the year have kind of come to fruition now, where he just isn't a good down-to-down player oftentimes, right? He just isn't always able to stay sticky in man coverage, whether that's a combination of getting a little bit older, the injuries, whatever it is. He just isn't a great player right now, and I don't think he's probably going to be. I think he's better than what we had last year opposite Joey. I do. I think even in his low moments, he's better. But how much better, it's kind of hard to say. I really think, and I think you're going to agree with me on this, Tommy, I think it's time for, assuming he's fully ready to go, I think it's time for Corey Trice to be the corner 2 on this team, at least to see if that works, because he at least gives you youth and size and athleticism that you're not getting from the other guys in this room.
Yeah, I don't think the Steelers will have the same thought process in mind,
No.
but Corey Trice is scheduled to come back this week, as is Dante Jackson, who left the game with a hamstring injury. I've been a huge Corey Trice fan since the moment they drafted him. Before that, I liked him a lot as a prospect. And he was playing really well. Small sample size, playing really well. Outside corner, slot corner, a little bit of safety. Like, he can do these things for you. And you're really struggling, and particularly opposite of Porter. Porter's struggling, obviously, with the penalties and some big plays allowed. Dante Jackson just doesn't look like that CB2 right now. And so I'm willing to at least try Trice opposite him and see what happens out there. You get more size, length, athletic traits at this stage of his career for sure. And so we'll see what happens once he comes back here. But yeah, they need an answer there. And I just don't think that they have it right now. I think that they're getting too easily exposed in the secondary at times. So definitely keep your eye on that and see what kind of usage they deploy there in the secondary. But I'm definitely intrigued by the idea of maybe turning to a Trice and just say, hey, let's see. We're going to put you in for a game and see what you got here. Anything else you want to hit on defense?
I think the safeties played fine. I think that Elliott had a decent game in run defense. His coverage has kind of been spotty all year just because it's not his forte, but he's still playing pretty well. And then Minka's doing Minka stuff. Like, he just, I think part of I saw someone, forget who it was, but tweet this earlier, but a lot of people were saying that Minka has been good this year, but it's solely because he's not getting interceptions. And it's like, listen, there's very few players, especially in modern NFL history, who can consistently have huge interception seasons, right? There's a reason for that. It's a high variance thing. It's a high variance stat. It does not mean he's not playing well. He is playing more of that middle of the field safety role, and that is helping the pass defense in a lot of ways. So everybody calm down about Minka. He's totally worth it. It's fine. Don't worry about it.
And the Steelers play a lot of cover 1, a lot of cover 3. Minka is that middleman there, and the Steelers just don't usually give up a lot of big plays and yardage over the middle of the field. I think they're top in the league in that department. And so that's part of it too. You know who's back there, who's roaming
people aren't
middle of the
him.
field. You're not testing him very much this season. And that's part of the reason for the lack of ball production, if you will. But I think it's probably a good trade-off overall when the Steelers have the second ranked scoring defense, 8th in yards. You can live with Minka not taking the ball away in those circumstances. Now there's a different conversation to be had about his cap number in the next couple of years here.
I do think moving that around will be good, but
I still think there's no question that Minka is a really good and really valuable safety to this team. It's just there's a safety conversation to be had in general, kind of like the linebackers of the defense. Like, how much should you, what percentage of your total salary cap space should you devote to a safety or to a linebacker or to a running back? Like, it just comes with the value, the territory of the position. But I do think that Minka is really good still, and he's having a really good season for what it's worth. Minka and Deshaun Elliott have the exact same grade on the year right now. I think they both ranked right out as the 12th best safety in the league, 13th best safety. So they're both having strong seasons. And Elliott, again, we can talk again about him being a good signing, what he's offered in run support. I think it's been critical to the success of the defense so far. All right, let's shift over and talk about the special teams real quick. A lot of times we don't have a lot to talk about. It's like, all right, Boswell, you're kicking well, and nothing really noteworthy because they never kicked the ball to Steelers for kick returns. This game, though, couple huge special teams play.
Yeah,
and James Pierre, I mean,
tale of two plays.
You got to catch that football. I don't fault the Steelers for doing it. I really don't.
No, the look was there. He was wide open.
The look was there. It's a lob. Like, that's a middle school catch right there. Like, it's a lob pass. I know he's got to be sick about it, so I don't want to give him more criticism than he's already getting right now, but that is a momentum changer. That is a game-changing call. You don't get yourself in this situation unless something like that happens. And so it's crazy that we talked about, Shayne, that even with that not going their way, set the Commanders up 15 yards away for a touchdown, punched it in 3 plays later, and then giving up the score before the half, and just the things that didn't go their way. Yes, there was the spot call at the end, but there were a lot of things that didn't go Pittsburgh's way. Still found a way to win, but man, Pierre, you've got to get that's a perfect ball. There's nobody within like 10 yards of you. Just catch the football. I don't care if you go down right where you catch it, but you got to keep the chains moving there. It was the right call overall, though.
Yeah, that's the thing that sucks is like I know Danny Smith is mad still right now. I know he's got to be so mad. And again, like James Pierre is a corner. There's a reason why he plays defense. All right, we know this. But again, like that is as easy as it gets in the league. Like if you're going to make a big special teams play on a fake, which isn't even a fake, it was just a call that they saw already out there. It's really tough to swallow. And again, he's lucky it didn't end with the Steelers losing the game, because maybe it wouldn't be him that's on the team currently. Maybe it'd be somebody else. Like that's the type of thing that as a bottom of the roster guy you don't want to do.
Yeah, for sure. And we talked about Ben Skoranek a little bit. Was already one of the stars of this game because of the play he made on special teams. Could have really been the star had that been him out there instead of
I think he probably
go to a wide receiver instead of a backup cornerback. But Skoranek, he just such a good gunner. Where I went back and I watched that hit that rep on that play like 6 times. I'm like, look at the way he does this. He gets past him, keeps his guy at bay, like keeps shoving him off, gets right in Olamide Zaccheaus's face. The ball gets coughed up. He's the first one on the ground. Like he's just really good at what he does. And so I don't often talk about special teams players because I think we can overhype them sometimes. They play such a small percentage of the game, but his impact has really been big in this area.
Yeah, it's important to have guys on special teams that are true difference makers at special teams because, like, look at what Miles Killebrew has meant to this team, right? Like guys like him. It's important. Like I understand people say it's not really a third of the game, but it's the third unit, right?
Yeah.
How many times have we seen in the playoffs in big games someone makes a play on special teams and they win, right? It's not usually the reason that you're a good team, but it can be the difference in a particular game. If you are very sound on special teams or you have guys who can make plays like we do, whether it's Minka blocking kicks or Killebrew blocking punts and whatever it is, like we're really good in specific areas of special teams. And that might matter in a playoff game, right? Like you look at the Packers 49ers a few years ago where seemingly neither team could do anything offensively, but the Packers lose because they make multiple special teams blunders. Like that's what can happen in that environment. The pressure gets amped up and sometimes people aren't ready for it, including the special teamers. So
yeah, and it's good to see so many big plays by the special teams this year because who knows when you get into the playoffs and these games are going to be so tough to come away with. A difference of a special teams play might be enough to swing the game in your favor. So definitely encouraging. Glad to have him back. He was on IR there for a little bit. Definitely the best special teams gunner on this team pretty easily right now. Anything else on special teams, Shayne, before we move on?
No, I mean, those are the 2 biggest plays. Yeah, outside of that, not much going on in the return game. Boz didn't have to do anything really except kick extra points, obviously, so you're good there. And Waitman was not a problem still, so we're happy.
I want to mention real quick, Calvin Austin left the game into concussion protocol. The Steelers, maybe as a preemptive move, signed Jamal Agnew, former All-Pro return man way back in 2017 when his first year with the Lions. Play with the Jaguars. Agnew has a lot of return experience.
Yeah.
Maybe they're preparing, and we don't know. Again, we record this ahead of Steelers' first injury report, but maybe the idea is that Austin's not going to be ready this week. And so, or at least they're covering their bases. If he can't play, you've got another quality punt returner there. He was played his last football in 2023 in Jacksonville. I still think he'd probably be a quality return man if Austin can't go, but I just thought we'd throw that out there real quick as well. If you are a fan of the Pittsburgh Steelers and would like to support the Still Curtain podcast, please consider subscribing to the Still Curtain podcast on YouTube. We appreciate all of your support. And Josh Yorsh has been doing the instant live reaction show after Steelers games these past couple of weeks. Sometimes he'll have a guest on with him for his show when he does it on Mondays. So make sure you go check out his show on our YouTube channel as well. All right, let's examine these trades a little bit deeper now, Shayne. We've had 1 week, and 1 week is a really small sample, but we've had 1 week of Mike Williams on the Steelers. We've had 1 week of Preston Smith on the Steelers, and both players have played relatively small roles to this point, like you kind of expect. But I think that there's an argument to be made that the Steelers knew what they were doing so far. Let's talk about Mike Williams first. In his game against the Commanders, didn't really see the field much until late in the game. Austin goes out, and I think that play probably would have been intended for Austin. I'm thankful that it wasn't. I'm thankful it was Mike Williams. That over-the-shoulder catch, I know that it might look easy, look routine from somebody who's caught a lot of footballs just casually in my lifetime. That's a tough adjustment. And I think I only feel confident with one other player on the team making that grab, and that's George Pickens, obviously. Mike Williams is clearly the next best player on the team that I would want in that situation when it comes to the ball tracking and making sure you secure that catch. I don't know, Shayne, if anybody else besides Pickens would have made that grab. He had to look all the way around his shoulder and then let it drop into a bucket right in the front of the end zone there. What do you think of his play late in the game there?
Again, this is literally the exact reason why he's a Steeler. Like it's specifically for this type of play where you're matched up on a guy that Benjamin St-Juste. I like him. I've liked him in the past. I think he should be a slot player because he's been one of the worst corners in the league this year. Just straight up. He gets burnt by him. You throw up a moon ball that Russ does, and he tracks it, like you said, over the shoulder. Not an easy thing to do. Have someone go throw you a couple of those, see how many of them you catch. It won't be very many, I promise you, especially if there's someone guarding you. Probably not. And he makes it look relatively easy because that's what Mike Williams has always been good at. It's the ball tracking, the ball skills, the ability to body up players. And in this instance, he didn't even have to do that. He just ran by him, right? Like, now you're not going to see that much from Mike Williams anymore. But if you do, he's going to make the play, and then he also has a chance to go up and make a play on these balls. So, again, I think that's what his role is going to be, and he already showed flashes of it, and not just flashes, but the biggest flash you could possibly show with the game-winning touchdown. So definitely you got to give props to him for that.
Yeah, huge play, huge third down play with the game on the line. Essentially, they needed that go-ahead score. Williams finished second on the team with 32 yards on his only target of the game. Yeah. Only played 9 snaps, but I have a feeling, especially after that, those snap numbers going to increase moving forward. And it's why the fit matters so much too. You look at him with the Jets, just was not a good fit there at all. Wasn't being used properly. Now you bring him to the Steelers where he's going to be your other 6'4" outside receiver to pair with his 6'3¼ George Pickens. Both of these guys can go up and get the ball. Both of these guys can box defenders out. Both of these guys have really good ball tracking skills. And we saw this was the perfect example for Mike Williams. He's been doing this for a decade in the NFL. He didn't lose that part of his game. Where I was concerned, Shayne, is not a lot of burst, not a lot of separation, not a lot of juice after the catch. Maybe it won't matter. Maybe if you're just launching moonballs to him in single coverage, that might be good enough right there to make that a really good fit with the team. And so hard not to be encouraged by that. It was just one target, but you did the absolute most with it that you could in this game.
Yeah, I think, again, we'll see more plays like that for him. I think that's going to be his biggest role. I do think, though, they'll throw him a couple slants where he kind of boxes out a corner. They'll throw him a couple things like that. But it's really going to be a lot of, like, when there's an opportunity to throw a moon ball down the field and Pickens is double covered, he's going to look at Mike Williams and go, all right, it's your ball, man. You got to go win this one. And that's what they're going to do. And I think there will be plays throughout the year where he makes them like that, and it makes a difference in the game.
Yeah, and I think he's going to have a few more critical moments like that the rest of the way because Pickens obviously is the guy that draws the attention. He's going to get some one-on-one opportunities, and he's got to be able to capitalize just like he did right here. Let's talk about Preston Smith. In his first game with the Steelers against the Washington Commanders, played 23 snaps in this contest, which is a good bit for a guy that just joined the team. Has only had a week of practice so far. And what's interesting, Shayne, is both Mike Williams and Preston Smith are not going to have a bye week this week. Their bye week was wiped out essentially because their team hadn't had one yet. They were traded to the Steelers as their bye was closing up. And so this will be, if both of these players remain healthy the rest of the year, this will be the first time in NFL history a pair of players on the same team played 18 regular season games, for what it's worth. So interesting little note there. The first time it's ever happened was just last year, obviously, because the 17-game schedule's only been around since 2021. But it was Leonard Williams who played the first 18 game regular season ever. He did it last year in the same situation where he lost his bye week as he got traded. So anyway, Preston Smith in this game, 23 snaps, had a 72.1 grade overall. I thought he looked pretty good on tape, had that critical run stop. Solid overall performance considering that he played minimal snaps, had 3 tackles, a sack, two tackles for a loss in this game. Like, he was doing exactly what you'd want a player in this situation to do. And Shayne, I'm still kind of dumbfounded the Steelers were able to get a starting edge rusher, started 9 games with the Packers, and essentially every game of his career before that, only a handful of games he didn't start, and they were able to get him for a 7th round pick. Like, it just seemed too good to be true.
Yeah, I think it's honestly based on his comments. I think it was kind of the same thing that the Bears did, where it's like they could have maybe gotten more for Fields from someone else, but he wanted to be here. He wanted to be out. I think the Packers gave him up because he wanted out, and the Steelers came calling, and they said, all right, fine. If you want to leave, if it's not working out for you here, which it wasn't, he wasn't playing the best of his career by any means. He definitely wasn't doing well in their new kind of like more like a 4-3 front type of defense where his hands on the ground more. I think they just wanted to give him a chance to go play somewhere else because he wasn't enjoying playing there, and so we get him for free pretty much. So,
yeah, let's talk about the roles of both of these guys now moving forward. Now that we have one game in the bag, we can kind of see what things are going to look like, how they both impressed in their first game. For Mike Williams, Shayne, I think it's pretty easy to say he's your wide receiver 2 right now. Like, it's beating Van Jefferson out was a really, really low bar. And Calvin Austin, I give Austin a lot of credit because he's maybe the only player on the team that has the juice and explosion after the catch to really be a threat in that department. Pickens has obviously gotten better there, but I still think Austin, there's a role for Austin as a slot receiver, right? He's undersized. He can do that role anyway, but I think this really hurts Van Jefferson's opportunities. And I don't see any reason to move forward in week 11 and beyond with Van soaking up snaps on the outside when you can be getting a guy who also lacks some juice in his game, but is just much better at the catch point in Mike Williams.
Yeah, the main difference between them is just that Williams has a particular skill that is still very high above average at the NFL level, right? Van doesn't really have that anymore. Never really did, honestly, but that's kind of more about him just being a balanced receiver throughout his career until he kind of started to fall off. But that's what it comes down to, like you said, is that there's a defined role for Williams that works within the offense that Jefferson can't fill. And so he's going to be a depth receiver. He's probably going to still play a decent amount sometimes because they'll use him as a blocker, even though he's not particularly great. But I just have a feeling they're going to keep doing that with him. And I think that he'll get occasional opportunities. But, yeah, he should be the receiver 4, theoretically, is what it should be. The outside receiver 3, but receiver 4 behind Austin when he's healthy. So, yeah, Williams should play much more towards, half of, if not more than that, of the snaps moving forward. And I think he, at least, like you said, he at least showed why he's here in his first game, and that should just kind of energize that snap count more.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, I don't think that Mike Williams is immune to a regression. Like, he could have a bad game. He could be targeted 5 times and catch 2 passes for 15 yards or something. I think that's possible. It's because of the lack of separation at the top of his route. But who do I trust more in those one-on-one situations? I think already in one target with the Steelers, I think it showed you that it's Mike Williams over Van Jefferson. I think he's going to be that guy is starting this week, and I think he needs to be that guy starting this week. And so you have to have a guy that can win one-on-one if Pickens is going to be getting the attention. And we'll see how much cover 2 teams start playing against the Steelers, because knowing that Russell Wilson still got it, he's still got that deep ball going for him. And you got 2 guys now who can box you out down the sidelines. But that's where I think it's trending. Preston Smith, Shayne, is going to have a sizable role that I don't think we saw forthcoming, because we knew that Nick Herbig was scheduled to come back this week. We assumed that Highsmith was going to be here, and now he's not. So instantly, Smith is going to be thrust into a much bigger role, and he should be. You need to keep these guys fresh. You can't be having Watt and Herbig out there for 90% of the snaps. There's no reason to do that. You've got a big edge defender who can play the run really well, stack and shed blocks, and can still give you something as a pass rusher. I mean, I think that Smith should be out there every early down opportunity you can get.
Yeah, I think if Highsmith hadn't gotten hurt, the role that we saw from him in this game would be what his role would be moving forward, even when Herbig got back. I still think he'd play a decent amount of snaps as that third or fourth edge, depending on how you view it. It's just easier to get a defender in there quickly than it is a receiver. Obviously, less things you have to kind of adjust to. And this is closer to the type of scheme that he's played in the past in terms of like his actual fit in it. So not surprising he played more than Williams did. But I think it's really important for Smith now that he's going to be playing probably close to half, if not more than half the snaps while Heisman is out, for him to just settle in as mainly focusing on his run defense. Because, yeah, he had the sack. Like, he's not a bad pass rusher, especially from the alignment that he's now playing in. But his focus has to be on his run defense and giving Herbig some breathers and let him just focus on pass rushing.
I agree, and I think that's best. When you look at the team composition, it's pretty easy to see he's the anti Nick Herbig in a good way because they complement each other very well.
They should.
He's the really, really solid run defender. Doesn't have as much juice these days as a nearly 32-year-old pass rusher, but where he lacks in the pass rush, that's where Herbig makes up for it. That's his bread and butter. He can really burst off that line, dip around the edge, get to the quarterback faster than anybody on the team, faster than TJ Watt, faster than Alex Highsmith.
Speed
at his fastest point. Like he is that guy. That's his specialty. That's his niche. So use them in unison, use them what they're good at. Not to say that you can't ever play Herbig on rundowns, that you can't ever play Smith on passing downs. But you want to use them to their strengths, obviously. And now we just got to hope that you don't get really thin again, because we got to last another 2 to 3 weeks here without having anybody get injured at the position, which the Steelers have not been able to do this year. It's always somebody. So the hope is, again, by the end of the season, all that really matters, if you can have all four of these guys healthy with a really strong rotation between the four, you're sitting pretty going into the playoffs. And that's going to be, outside of the performance of Russell Wilson, that's probably the second biggest thing you can point to. This team is and has been, since TJ Watt was drafted here, built around the pass rush and built specifically the defense around TJ Watt and his success. And so if they are firing on all cylinders in terms of their pass rush, they're going to have a chance. They're going to have a chance against nearly anybody they play. Every team is beatable this year. Kansas City is beatable. I don't care what their record says. They're a beatable football team.
Should have been beat last week. Let's be honest.
They should have been beat a couple times. They nearly got beat by Denver last week. So definitely encouraging to see, yes, this team could be a contender. We'll see how the hardest stretch of their schedule goes here.
Yes,
but it looks like they could be an actual contender for the first time since Ben Roethlisberger in the last couple of years of his career. All right, Shayne. We talked about projected roles. These trades are paying dividends already. I have no doubt about that. Like, what would you have put a price tag on, Shayne, if I could have told you what draft pick would you be willing to give up for the Steelers if Mike Williams literally wins you the football game with a critical late fourth quarter touchdown catch for the Steelers? Like what pick would you, if that swung a game just by itself, what would you give up for that?
I mean, I think he's already earned the fifth, right? Like I think that's the bar. I think this type of play, like if this is all he does for us this year, for the most part, it's fine because it's a day 3 pick. I think that's totally fine. Now the question is, if he does this again, or at least is productive for the rest of the season and makes a couple plays in the playoffs, assuming obviously we get there, which we should, then I mean, you could have given a fourth, you could whatever, like, because I think the key thing here is people when we talk about draft picks and capital and trading for players who may not be long-term pieces, who may be guys who aren't the focus of the offense, sometimes it's really hard to quantify, like, how much can you really afford to give up for those guys, right? Like, even a 5th round pick, you and I both were like, it's a little more than I want to give up for Mike Williams at this point in his career. None of that matters if this team wins a playoff game and he's a part of why. None of it matters if we win 2 playoff games and he's a big part of why. Because that's what the name of the game is. All the draft picks, all the players you sign, the money you spend, all of it is the point of all of it is to win games and win playoff games, right? So if you do that, who cares about the 5th round pick? Because if that player turns out to be a great player at that pick, who knows if you would have been the one to take him, right? Who knows what the draft would have looked like if it was your pick? Like, you can't really plan for that type of stuff. But what you can do is right now you can say, I need Mike Williams on my team because I need somebody who can go win go balls from Russell Wilson. He's available. He's relatively cheap. Bring him over here. that's what Khan was thinking. And I think that that's what general managers in general are thinking when they make moves like this is like, yeah, I'd love to have that 5th round pick to add maybe a depth player that could play for me for 4 years or whatever. But if that player isn't guaranteed to help me right now and this player might, that's fine.
Yeah, and my holdup with the Williams trade, Shayne, was kind of twofold. It was I didn't think that Williams was playing well at all on the Jets. I mean, he was kind of buried on their depth chart when he was targeted. It wasn't efficient. Aaron Rodgers had a 43.1 pass rating when throwing to him. And I do think that the scheme was part of that, the way he was being used.
Yes.
The other part of that is just knowing how well this team is drafted over the past 2 years. Like, I know it's a 5th round pick, but that could be a Corey Trice. That could be maybe a Nick Herbig type player. Like this team is drafted so well in a 2-year sample size, in my opinion, at least. I think it's going to turn out that way, that you didn't know what that could be. And so you are, I mean, realistically, you're getting a half-year rental of a receiver, a 30-year-old wide receiver. He needs to be good if you're doing that, but it is a 5th round pick. Mike Williams has already made up for it because of the game-altering play that he made in this game. I think what you get from him here on out is essentially bonus. He already helped swing you that game in your favor. And hopefully he can kind of return more to the Mike Williams we saw in 2023 with the Chargers. He had the ACL tear just after 3 games. And so that was the other part. I also wondered if he would get that speed and explosion back at this stage of his career, but we know he's got good hands. He's been a good player for a decade in the NFL, and he's looking closer to that player than the guy that he did on the Jets, which is a good thing. But yeah, if you had to put a price tag on it right now, Shayne, after what he did, would you go as high as a 4th round pick to
probably because again, I'm expecting this to continue to some degree. Maybe he's not going to catch game-winning touchdowns every week, but if he catches a couple 30-yard passes that get you points that maybe Calvin Austin wouldn't be able to make because he's too short, or Van Jefferson couldn't make because he's not good, like whatever the difference is, right? That matters down the stretch. Like, this is a team that has division-winning aspirations now because you're right there with the Ravens record-wise. You have to play them twice still. You get to play the other divisional games, so you have a chance to have the best division record. This stuff is what's going to make the difference in terms of whether they can go in a deep playoff run. Because if you have a home game in the playoffs, if you're one of the top 3 seeds, realistically, you probably are going to be if you win this division. That matters a ton because you might face a team that's not honestly that great in the wild card round. A lot of the teams that are in the wild card contention are teams we've already beaten once. And you could say, well, it's hard to beat a team twice in the same season when you don't play them regular. Sure. But we've already proven we can beat the teams that are probably going to be in that range. And then even a team like maybe the Bengals, right? Maybe we can keep them out of the playoffs, which the rest of the AFC would probably be very happy about because even though the defense is bad, Joe Burrow is balling out. They don't want to deal with him. All this stuff could matter down the stretch, and I think he's going to play a part in that.
Yeah, I think I think that the same thing, Shayne. Really, it's all about windows in the NFL. We've talked about this so much before. Russell Wilson turns 36 years old at the end of this month, and so why wait any longer? Why wait to capitalize on this chance? Like, now was the time to do it. Sure, you had to give up a 5th round pick for a 30-year-old receiver that is a half-year rental. His contract's going to expire. It was already worth it, and I'm thankful that it was, and not the other way around where he didn't come up with that play. I think that we're going to be having a different conversation right now if that ball bounces off his hands or he's unable to track it. But that's something that Williams has done throughout his career, and so it's encouraging to see that he was still able to do it in the biggest moment of the game. So,
and if the Steelers do roll back with Wilson next year, maybe they give Williams a 1-year deal to come back and be, at least in contention for receiver 2 spot. Like, we don't know what kind of the future holds for this team in terms of quarterback position or anything else. It's kind of all wide open. So, who knows? Williams might end up playing for us longer than just half a year, depending on how things play out. So.
Yeah, and just the way that the roster construction is, it's not just Russell Wilson. TJ Watt's 30. He's going to slow down at some point. We hate to even think about that, but
it's true.
And maybe it started. Honestly, I don't know yet. But Cam Hayward's going to be 36 years old next year. Like,
which means he'll have his best season probably.
He just gets better. He's a fine.
He's just going to keep getting better until he falls off entirely.
Man, how great! I want him to just go. Like, you could make it to 40, man.
It'd be awesome. 40-year-old defensive tackle that's still better than most guys. It'd be funny.
Preston Smith, the trade. I mean, come on, 7th round pick.
He got on the field. That's pretty much.
We knew that was a win from the beginning, and Smith is the same way. He's got 2 years remaining on his contract, but he's never going to see those years because the
No,
contract numbers are
no shot.
awful. You're not
No shot.
paying that for a backup. I think it's like 12.5 million per season or something that way. You're not paying that for backup. He's going to get cut after this year. He's going to be a cap casualty, and maybe he'd be willing to come back to the team. It depends on what his market looks like.
Maybe.
I kind of have a feeling not if he's the fourth edge, but we'll see how he does the rest of the way and what the suitors look like for him. He's going to be 32 years old. But for a 7th round pick, to get a guy that's already started 9 games this year, started like 100 and spitballing 138 games in his career over the past decade, he's been a really good football player and a productive football player. I think he's had like 68, 69 sacks in his career. That's a steal for a 7th round pick. I every day of the week.
Yeah, that was never really in question. I mean, this was basically like the Packers wanted to kind of basically let him do what he wanted to do, which was not play for them anymore. The Steelers were like, sure, we'll take, a starting edge rusher for a 7th round pick when we have 3 other guys who technically probably are starting edge rushers. Why not? Like that. I mean, that one's kind of, he got on the field and made a play. That's pretty much like it's already over, right? Like that, you've already won that trade essentially. But again, that one was less about winning or losing it. It was just like, that's just how it played out because of the situation with the Packers. So.
Yeah, and Shayne, now seeing what Smith was able to do in his first week, seeing that Alex Highsmith is injured, knowing what you know now, would you go back? Steelers didn't have a 6th round pick this year, but would you go back and give up your other 5th round pick? Steelers have 2. They're going to have 1 now. The pick that they're giving for Mike Williams is going to be the lesser value of their 2 5th round picks. Would you give up your other pick for Preston Smith?
I mean, considering Alex Highsmith just got hurt, probably, right? Like, it's still not that much for a player that is going to play as much as he's going to probably play now. Now, granted, if that doesn't happen, maybe he doesn't play that much. Ultimately, once Herbig's back, maybe it's not quite worth a 5th round pick. But again, this is a guy that, despite not playing that well this year because of the scheme change with the Packers, is a starting caliber edge rusher in a lot of ways. Like that's just the case, right? He has been for a long time. It's kind of hard to get a player like that who isn't, 35 instead of 32 or whatever it's going to be for less than a 5th round pick. So.
And it's almost comical when you look back at it. It's almost like Omar Khan and Andy Weidel had this foresight, like, yeah, Mike Williams is going to make the game-winning touchdown for us. Alex Highsmith's going to get injured again, and we're going to be well set up still. And so it certainly looks that game. They got lucky that way, and so I think every Steelers fan should be thankful for that. Yes, sir, we have 2 fewer draft picks to look forward to next April, and I love the NFL draft as much as anybody. I am biased towards the NFL draft.
Me too.
But it's about capitalizing on this window right now with a quarterback who is literally playing for the Steelers on the veteran minimum, even though he's still getting paid by the Broncos. That is what you needed to do to give yourself the best chance to win. And the AFC is, like we said, it's wide open right now. There is no powerhouse, unbeatable team, despite what Kansas City's record might say. And so never a better time to pounce than now. All right, Shayne, let's move forward. And we're going to talk about the Steelers versus Ravens in our last segment today before we close out the show. Huge game coming up here. Huge game with huge AFC North implications on the line. You could bury this Ravens team in some ways, not out of the playoffs, but you could really take a commanding lead over the division, over your biggest rival right now with a win here at home on Sunday. We had hoped at one point this game would be flexed. It couldn't be flexed because of the broadcasting rules. And both CBS and Fox need to each get one divisional game. It's odd,
a complicated, weird.
Would have been the perfect game to put in Sunday Night Football. You talk about 2 really good AFC teams right now in just the bitter rivalry between the 2. Instead, they'll be playing at 1:00 kickoff in Pittsburgh at Acrisure Stadium. The Steelers open the game, Shayne, as 3-point underdogs in this contest, which meaning if this was on a neutral field, odds makers think this would be a 6-point game in Baltimore's favor.
Yeah. So here's the problem with it is I think obviously you look at these teams and how they've played this year. The Ravens have this weird thing, which is something they always do, where they will absolutely unequivocally annihilate a team, just blow them out of the water. And then they lose to the Raiders. And then they go and play a team that's definitely in their same caliber, and they dominate them pretty comfortably, like the Bills, right? And then they just again they find weird ways to lose games. They are I want to say, and this is not just my Steelers fan talking. they have been like the least clutch football team in the league for a while. Like their fourth quarters have some disastrous moments to them sometimes. And a lot of the time it's not even like, oh, like Lamar stops playing good or whatever. It's like the defense collapses, they stop being aggressive on offense, they just punt. It's just this weird roadblock they have sometimes. They're really the anti-Steelers in a lot of way, which is ironic considering the division that we play in with them. But it's a weird thing with them, and so this line doesn't make a ton of sense to me in the sense that this is a divisional game. I do not like to give divisional opponents, even bad ones, more than 3 points because it's a division game. Just look at what happened with the Falcons and Saints last week. Like everyone knows the Falcons are better than the Saints. They still lost. Like sometimes it happens with divisional opponents. So this line does confuse me a little bit. But again, the Ravens are also rolling offensively. So I think that's part of it.
Yeah, you talk about divisional games. They beat the Bengals 35-34 in a game that the Bengals easily could have won at the end of that contest as well. So it ended up going for 2 and ended up being the wrong choice there. But you called it. They lost some of these questionable games. You go back to even week 1 against the Chiefs, Isaiah Likely's foot on the line, and that would have been a touchdown right there to tie the game late in the fourth quarter. This Ravens team, though, Shayne, it's so different. This is not your early 2000s Ravens.
Nope.
This team is 100% offense and 0% defense right now. And that's the issue is you can't exploit them. The question then becomes, can the Steelers do enough on offense, even against a porous defense, to win this football game? The Ravens are the number 1 team in the league in scoring at 31.8 points per game. The Steelers have the second best scoring defense, allowing 16 points a game. Something's got to give here. One of these two stats is going to look off after this week. Is it going to be Pittsburgh being able to contain the Ravens, or is it going to be the Ravens doing what they do and scoring a lot of points? I know that the argument a lot of Steelers fans are going to come at you with is, well, Steelers have been great against Lamar Jackson. He's got 4 touchdowns and 7 interceptions, and they've sacked him 20 times. That's true. This is not the same Lamar Jackson. It's not the same Ravens offense. You now have more explosive players. Jackson's playing the best football of his career. He is truly a front runner MVP candidate. He's having an awesome season, on pace for 40 some touchdowns and 4 interceptions this year. Like, it's incredible. So you can't expect to have the same level of success against Lamar as you've had in the past. So I don't know how this one's going to go. I have a prediction, which we're going to give here in a second, but the very different looking Ravens team and possibly a different looking outcome than what we've been used to these past several years. Let's talk about the injuries going into this week. Shayne, obviously the big one for the Pittsburgh Steelers is no Alex Highsmith. You're going to have to make up for that with a healthy combination of Nick Herbig and Preston Smith in this contest, and still find a way to maybe get TJ Watt some favorable looks, or to not overwork him so much this contest either.
Yeah, that's kind of the key thing here is with the pass rushing unit being bolstered by Preston Smith and Herbig coming back, I think that's going to allow this team to be a similar caliber pass rushing team, right? Like Highsmith being out obviously sucks because he's a great player, but they've prepared for this clearly. Like, this was something that they knew they had to do with Herbig going down at one point. Highsmith obviously has already gone down once before the season. They made the right move by going to get Preston Smith, regardless of the cost, whether it was good or bad for them. And we're going to see that this week, because I think realistically, the only way you're going to be able to contain this offense to me is when Lamar does drop back and pass, which is going to be a decent amount. That's just, they've been much better at that. You have to get to him and actually take him down. And now that's not an easy task, as we know. But that's going to be a big part of it, because the run game is going to be really hard to stop. Let's just be honest about it. Derrick Henry is a load, and Lamar is a load as a runner in this game. But if you can at least get him on the ground a couple times, get a couple punts by getting a big play on second or third down to knock them out of range to get points, that is going to be how you keep them from getting to that 30-point mark that they've been hitting pretty consistently.
Yeah, absolutely. You look at the Ravens team right now, other than the guys that were already on IR for them, no huge names.
Not really, no.
Their team is pretty healthy. I know Kyle Hamilton was banged up, but the rest of their starting lineup, they look good to go for this game. And so not a lot to note that way. Let's talk about the matchups, Shayne. There's just so many ways for this Ravens offense to succeed. Lamar's been doing it through the air. as the most efficient passer in the NFL this season. Derrick Henry, like you said, is an absolute load. Who would have thought? 30 years old with all the carries. It seems like he's got 10,000 carries at this point. Like,
Doesn't
the
matter.
guy's been playing forever. He doesn't seem to wear down. And if you give him a crease and he gets that momentum going, he's the juggernaut. Like, he is a guy that can just run through you or run past you. He's got that build up speed, and he is playing as good as ever. I mean, he is legitimately, it makes me wonder, is he the last Hall of Fame running back, Shane? Is he the last Hall of Fame running back? Or are they going to have to change the standard for running backs because running backs just don't play this long anymore?
I think the key there is he might be the last Hall of Fame 10,000-yard rushing running back.
Maybe that's
I think that could potentially happen, because I don't think Elliott's getting there with the way his career is winding down. He's the closest. McCaffrey's legs don't work apparently for half of the seasons anymore. I don't know about the future of it, because again, we'll see if that kind of readjusts itself even more, because the running game has come back. But yeah, just talk about Derrick. Like, maybe it's just because when you're that big and that fast, it just doesn't matter how many carries you have. But like, I mean, it doesn't make sense. Like, even last year with the Titans, right? He wasn't as efficient as he's been in the past. That team was bad. We know this. But when he did get in the open field, I was like, he's still Derrick Henry. Like, you still see the speed. Like, it's scary a guy that big and that old is that fast. Like, it's crazy to watch. It's insane. I still don't understand it. Like, the run he had against the Cowboys, where I'm like, okay, they're going to catch him. And then it's like, oh, they're not. They're losing ground. Like, oh, that's not good. It's not. No, the rest of the league was like, I wish I didn't have that on tape right now, because I do not want to see that in a couple of weeks. Like, it's just, it's insane.
He's not your average running back at all.
No, I would say not.
Yeah, you think that he'd be easier to catch in the open field, but and it pains me to see him on the Ravens, because I like Derrick Henry. I think that he's
very
been
much so.
Really good player for a long time. Zay Flowers is the other one. It's like, man, Shane, if there is a receiver in the NFL right now that compares most favorably to Antonio Brown, is it Zay Flowers? Just the way he moves, the way he just plucks the ball, his ability to make people miss after the catch. Like, he's just so good at a lot of different things, and he's been awesome for this Ravens team.
Yeah, he's definitely coming to his own, and I expected that. He was definitely a favorite of mine in the draft last year, so no surprises there. But again, this passing offense, like, it's still a little bit kind of put together and thrown together in some ways, but Zay is a true receiver one for them, which is what they haven't really had. Even when they had Marquise Brown, it was more of a like, yeah, he's a deep threat, he'll catch some crossers, whatever, but not a true receiver one. Zay can beat you in just about every way that you can be beat. The rest of the receivers are playing well. I think just the matchup with this passing game versus our pass defense, it's a lot of hoping the rush gets home. I'm just going to be honest with you. It's not the best matchups for our corners. A lot of fast guys, or big guys who can run down the middle of the field. Like, it's not the best matchup for the pass defense.
Yeah, no, it's not, and that's a little bit concerning, especially coming off of the game that these guys just had.
Yeah,
I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the homecomings here. Deontay Johnson going against his former team, Patrick Queen going against his former team, maybe Jeremiah Moon too this week, now that the Steelers are down a player. Not that he's got a big vendetta against the Ravens, who gave him a chance.
Right.
But Queen going against this team, showing that he's that guy, that he can succeed without Roquan. Deontay Johnson has been really quiet, and I hope he doesn't wake up all of a sudden. In his first two games with the Ravens, just 6 yards and a catch, I believe. And so nothing so far, and kind of didn't really need him there. The offense was so good without him. Offers insurance to this team, as long as he doesn't end up becoming a cancer to them and complaining about not getting looks or whatever, like he tends to do at times, and kind of force his way out of Pittsburgh and Carolina. But we'll see if he offers anything this week. I kind of think that it's going to be another quiet week for Deontay, but who knows? Maybe this will be the week he gets going.
Yeah, I mean, I think it'd be really good for them to get him going if they can, just to get him involved in the offense enough. Like, not at the detriment of the offense. Like, don't force feed him or anything stupid. But I think getting him involved and getting him comfortable is going to be really important for the playoffs specifically, because if Zay gets locked up by the other team's number one corner, if Bateman is not having a game that you expect him to have, because he has had his ups and downs this year, I think it's going to be really important to have a separator like him able to kind of help you convert third downs. And that's the key thing, is if he can become that player for them, that is well worth the trade. So,
Yeah, and you talk about the other guys. I'm not the biggest Bateman fan. I'm not the biggest Aguilar fan, but they're 3 deep at tight end with Mark
Yes.
Andrews, Isaiah Likely, and Charlie Kohler. Like they just have so many options, so many guys that you could spread the ball out to, and it's hard to narrow in on one guy. I think specifically in the passing game, Zay Flowers has got to be the guy that
Yes, you
you
have
try
to
to take out
focus
of
on
this
him.
contest. But Lamar's just been so good, so accurate, and so careful with the football this year that it's hard to focus too much on one guy, just knowing all the options that can beat you on this team. So,
Yeah.
Any other matchups that you want to highlight here, Shayne, before we give our predictions?
There's one thing I want to mention, and this is for Steelers fans, for us to think about.
Mhm.
I know Lamar, you mentioned it earlier. Lamar has not played particularly well against the Steelers. And he hasn't played in all
No.
these games. We've won 7 of the last 8 games against them in total, right?
Mm.
I need to stress this. Last year, Lamar should have comfortably beaten us. I know that it was a fun game and we managed to win on that Pickens touchdown. Great. His receivers had maybe the worst game of any receiving group in the past 2 years. I'd have to go
Yeah,
back and
it
kind
was
of look
bad.
at it more in depth, but 8 drops from what I remember, multiple drops that could have easily been big third down conversions, even touchdowns potentially a couple. He did not play poorly against the Steelers last time we saw him, and this is a better version of that Lamar Jackson. Okay, I do not want Steelers fans to think or assume. Now maybe he doesn't play well, obviously, like, you don't know, but I do not want Steelers fans just to brush it off and the guy Lamar can't beat us. He's not good against us. Yeah, whatever. I don't think it's safe to say that anymore. So just be
Yeah.
prepared for that if that happens.
Oh yeah, I would certainly urge you to err on the side of caution
Yes.
because this Lamar Jackson is the best version of this player that we've seen so far.
And this guy
Quite
has 2
honestly,
MVPs.
could
So
win his third. I was just
I
going to say,
think
could
so,
win
yeah.
his third this year
I
and never
should
been
so
more
far.
deserving of it than this
No.
year. You could argue that it should have gone to Josh Allen, somebody
There's
else
guys
last year.
you could argue for sure. So, yeah.
Absolutely. This year, though, it's like he probably should run away with the way things are going right now, depending on how the Ravens finish out the season.
Yeah.
It's early, but he's playing really, really good football. So when we get to our game predictions here, Shayne, like I said, I don't have mine. And I'm going to let you take the floor first, but my prediction is not like the Steelers Ravens games that we're used to seeing. It's going to be a little bit more high scoring than that for me.
Yeah. Mine is on that side of things, but probably maybe not as much as maybe what you're thinking. We'll see. I do think the Steelers win this game. I think they're going to split with the Ravens this time. I don't think they can beat them both times this time. One, we're not playing them in week 18 when they have nothing to play for like we did last year. And 2, I do think this is, like I said, a different version of Lamar. But I do think if we're going to split, it is going to be getting the win at home, just kind of give us the edge there. I have 27-24 Steelers. I think that both offenses play well. I think the Steelers' offense is able to do things because they've shown they can against defenses that are playing at a similar level to the Ravens, which is not good right now. And I think that our defense will do enough to limit their offense to keep them off that 30-point kind of trend they've been on. So I'll give us the win, but in a close one.
All right, Shayne. I wish that I had your confidence in this one. And I do agree with you. They probably are more likely to win that home game against the Ravens, but Lamar is playing so good. This is such a well-coached team, and this offense is completely on fire right now. The Steelers' defensive backs are coming off of a questionable game. I don't know if they're going to have the same success that they did against the Commanders, and even then they allowed 27 points in kind of a fluky game there.
Yeah.
But I've got the Steelers dropping this one. I have them losing 28-31. And I think it's going to be, I'm going way above the point total this time, just because knowing, I'm just kind of going with my gut. I'm going above that, knowing what the Ravens have done this year. This is not going to be that 13-10 type of game, that 17-13 type of game. I would be shocked if it was. As often as the Steelers and Ravens have had those games in the past, they're just two different football teams right now. I think the Steelers do have a good defense. They're really, really going to be battle tested this week against the league's top offense, and I want to see how they do with that. I think that they passed the test against the Commanders, but not with flying colors. Like there was certainly room to be better there. But against the Ravens, this is it. This is the big test that can kind of shape the whole direction of your season. You lose this game, if you get blown out by the Ravens, we could be in for some issues here. It could be hard to fight back and hard to compete for that division. But I do think that the Ravens are kind of going to be able to have their way with Pittsburgh's defense. Unfortunately, I hope that I'm wrong in this. I'd like to be proven wrong, and we will find out on Sunday, and we'll reconvene again on the show next week. All right, we go live on YouTube every Wednesday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern time. So if you were here in the chat, thank you for joining us today. Also, check out Josh Yoris's show live on Mondays at 1:30 p.m. Eastern time. Sometimes he goes live with post-game reactions as well. So make sure you check those out. Thank you for joining us on the show today. You can follow Shayne on Twitter/X at Shayne Kubas. You can follow me on Twitter at Tommy Jaggi. You can download the Still Curtain podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Also check us out on YouTube or ask Alexa to play the Still Curtain Steelers podcast. And thanks again for listening to the Still Curtain podcast.